Hello and welcome to the Horror Hearth. Tonight, gather round, and I'll tell you a tale that will freeze your blood and make you question the darkness that lurks beyond our world. It's a story of a place where the bravest of souls dare not tread. A place known as Beyond the Doorway of Damned Souls. Imagine a village nestled deep in the heart of a dense forest. The villagers lived simple lives, farming the land and worshipping their gods. But there was a legend, a whispered tale of a doorway that stood at the edge of the forest. A doorway that led to a realm where the damned souls resided. They said that on certain nights, when the moon hung low in the sky, you could hear the whispers of the damned. Whispers that beckoned the brave and the curious to step beyond the doorway. Many tried, but none returned. The villagers believed that once you crossed the threshold, there was no turning back. One stormy night, a young traveler stumbled into the village. He was soaked to the bone and shivering with fear. The villagers took him in, and as he warmed himself by the fire, he told them of his encounter with the doorway. He claimed to have seen it, standing tall and ominous at the edge of the forest. And he swore that he heard the whispers calling to him, tempting him to step beyond. As the young traveler finished his tale, the villagers exchanged nervous glances. They had heard the stories, but to have someone sit among them, claiming to have seen the doorway, was a different matter altogether. The village elder, a wise and aged man, spoke up. "Tell us, traveler, what did you see beyond the doorway?" The young traveler hesitated, as if unsure of how to describe what he had witnessed. "I saw shadows, dark, twisted shapes that seemed to move of their own accord. And I heard the whispers, louder than before. They were calling to me, tempting me to step further into the darkness." The villagers leaned in, their eyes wide with a mix of fear and fascination. And then, the village elder prompted. The young traveler's voice dropped to a whisper. "I saw a figure, tall, gaunt, and with eyes that glowed like embers. It reached out to me, beckoning me to follow. I tried to run, but my feet felt heavy, as if rooted to the spot." The villagers gasped, their collective breath a soft hiss. Suddenly, a loud crash of thunder boomed outside, making everyone jump. The fire in the hearth flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. The young traveler's eyes locked onto something behind the villagers. "What's that?" he whispered, his voice trembling. The villagers turned to see what had caught his attention, and that's when they saw it. The villagers turned to see what had caught the young traveler's attention. At first, they saw nothing out of the ordinary, but then they noticed it. A faint flickering light in the window of the abandoned cottage on the outskirts of the village. The cottage had stood vacant for years, its former occupant having disappeared under mysterious circumstances. The villagers avoided the place, whispering tales of curses and evil spirits. The young traveler's eyes remained fixed on the window. "What is that place?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The village elder's expression turned grave. "That, my friend, is the Devil's Haven, a place of darkness and shadow where the veil between worlds is thin." As they spoke, the light in the window grew brighter, casting an eerie glow over the village. The wind began to pick up, rustling the leaves and sending the villagers' cloaks fluttering. Suddenly, the door to the cottage creaked open, as if pushed by an unseen hand. The villagers gasped, their hearts racing with fear. The young traveler took a step forward, his eyes fixed on the open doorway. "I have to go there," he said, his voice firm with determination. The villagers tried to hold him back, but he shook them off. "I have to know what's beyond the doorway," he said, his eyes burning with a fierce curiosity. And with that, he stepped forward into the darkness of the Devil's Haven. The villagers froze, paralyzed with fear, They tried to step back, but their feet felt rooted to the spot. The young traveler's grin grew wider, his eyes glinting with an otherworldly light. "Come and see," he whispered, his voice dripping with malice. "Come and see what lies beyond the doorway." The villagers exchanged terrified glances. They knew they had to get away, but their bodies seemed to be under some sort of dark spell. And then, one by one, they began to move towards the doorway. Their legs moved stiffly, as if controlled by an unseen force. The village elder tried to resist, but he was dragged forward, his eyes wide with terror. As they stepped across the threshold, the villagers were met with a sight that defied all explanation. A world of twisted shadows and dark magic stretched out before them, a realm where the very fabric of reality seemed to be torn apart. The young traveler laughed, his voice echoing through the void. "Welcome to my world," he said. "You'll never escape." And with that, the doorway slammed shut behind them, trapping the villagers in a realm of unspeakable horror. The villagers stumbled forward, their eyes adjusting slowly to the dim light. They found themselves in a twisted landscape of black trees and scarlet flowers, the air thick with the scent of decay. As they moved deeper into the realm, they began to notice strange symbols etched into the trees. They pulsed with a malevolent energy, seeming to watch the villagers with cold calculation. The village elder stumbled, his foot catching on a hidden root. As he fell, he saw something that made his blood run cold. A figure, tall and imposing, stood watching them from the shadows. Its face was twisted into a grotesque grin, and its eyes burned with an otherworldly fire. The villagers froze, paralyzed with fear, as the figure began to move towards them. Suddenly, the young traveler appeared at their side, his eyes gleaming with an unnatural light. "Don't worry," he whispered. "You're safe now. You're mine." And with that, the villagers were surrounded by a horde of twisted creatures, their eyes burning with an evil intensity. The villagers screamed, but their cries were drowned out by the sound of their own hearts pounding in terror. The creatures closed in, their twisted forms seeming to shift and writhe like living shadows. The villagers tried to run, but their feet felt heavy, as if rooted to the spot. The young traveler laughed, his voice echoing through the void. "You should have stayed out of this," he said, his eyes gleaming with malevolence. As the creatures reached out to claim them, the villagers saw something that made their blood run cold. The young traveler's body began to stretch and contort, his limbs elongating like rubber. His face twisted into a grotesque grin, and his eyes burned with an otherworldly fire. The villagers realized too late that the young traveler was not what he seemed. He was a gateway, a doorway to a realm of unspeakable horror, and now the villagers were trapped, with no escape from the clutches of the twisted creatures that surrounded them. The young traveler's grin grew wider, his eyes burning with an evil intensity. "You'll make perfect additions to our collection," he hissed. And with that, the creatures closed in, their twisted forms engulfing the villagers like a living nightmare. As the creatures dragged the villagers deeper into the twisted realm, they caught glimpses of unspeakable horrors. Grotesque statues loomed in the shadows, their eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. The air was thick with the stench of decay and corruption, and the villagers could feel the weight of the realm's dark magic bearing down upon them. The young traveler led the procession, his twisted form seeming to shift and writhe like a living thing. He chuckled to himself, clearly enjoying the villagers' terror. As they turned a corner, the villagers saw something that made their blood run cold. A massive, twisted cathedral loomed before them, its walls adorned with grotesque carvings that seemed to depict unspeakable rituals. The young traveler stopped before the cathedral's entrance, his grin growing even wider. "Welcome to our humble abode," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. And with that, he pushed open the creaking doors, revealing a dimly lit interior that seemed to stretch on forever. The villagers were dragged inside, their screams echoing off the cold stone walls. As they stumbled deeper into the cathedral, they saw something that made their hearts freeze. A figure, tall and imposing, sat on a twisted throne, its eyes fixed upon the villagers with cold calculation. The figure on the throne was shrouded in shadows, making it impossible to discern any features. But its presence was palpable, filling the air with an unspeakable malevolence. The villagers were dragged closer, their feet scraping against the cold stone floor. As they approached the throne, they saw that the figure was surrounded by a halo of flickering candles, casting eerie shadows on the walls. The young traveler bowed low, his twisted form seeming to contort in ways that defied human anatomy. "My master," he hissed, "I have brought the offerings." The figure on the throne slowly raised its head, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. The villagers felt a chill run down their spines as the figure's gaze fell upon them. "Ah, yes," the figure hissed, its voice like a rusty gate. "The villagers, how quaint." The villagers exchanged terrified glances, unsure of what fate had in store for them. The figure on the throne began to chuckle, a low, menacing sound that seemed to shake the very foundations of the cathedral. Suddenly, the candles surrounding the throne flickered and died, plunging the cathedral into darkness. The villagers were trapped, surrounded by an unspeakable horror that seemed to be closing in on them from all sides. And then, a faint whispering began to echo through the darkness, seeming to come from all directions at once. "You should not have come here," the voices hissed. "Now you will never leave." As the whispering grew louder, the villagers realized they were surrounded by an unseen horde of twisted souls. The darkness seemed to coalesce into grasping hands, dragging them down into the depths of madness. The villagers screamed, their voices echoing off the cold stone walls as they were consumed by the void. And when the darkness finally receded, there was only silence. The young traveler stood alone, his twisted form glowing with an otherworldly light. He smiled, his eyes burning with malevolence. "The doorway is always open," he whispered, his voice carrying on the wind, "and you're always welcome to come back." As the last villager's scream faded into the darkness, the cathedral doors creaked shut, sealing the horrors within. But the doorway remained, waiting for its next victim. If you dare to enter the doorway, subscribe to the Horror Hearth for more terrifying tales that will haunt your dreams. Join us next time for another journey into the heart of horror. If you survive, don't forget to like, comment, and share your own horror stories with us. And if you're feeling brave, join our community of horror enthusiasts to discuss the latest scares and frights.